Okay, I hope that the picture's clear, and let's get started. So we're doing Advanced Phrasal Verbs 6. This is from the Advanced Phrasal Verbs book, available from Cambridge University Press by Felicity Odell and Michael McCarthy. They do a lot of other books as well, which are also excellent, but we're focusing on phrasal verbs, and we're looking at chapters 36 to 40. If you're interested in the other earlier chapters, please see my other earlier videos called Advanced Phrasal Verbs. You should see them on the left of this screen. Now, let's start with bail someone out. This is a very common phrasal verb nowadays in the news as well as on the street in everyday English. But bail someone out, originally it meant when you were in trouble with the police and you went to the police cells, and if you wanted to be released, somebody had to pay for your release. And it didn't mean you were released forever, of course. If you were charged with a crime, if you had been charged with a crime, you would be released provisionally, and you would be released just until your court case, where you would be expected to go to court. So if your friend bailed you out of prison, of jail really, of a police cell, that simply meant that they paid money and rescued you. They saved you from the police, and you were given your freedom in exchange for money, in exchange for cash. So nowadays this means to rescue anybody financially. And so in 2007, when there was a financial crisis, the government, the taxpayer, bailed out many of the banks. A lot of the banks had spent too much money, or they simply had loaned lots of money and not got the money back, and they were in trouble. And so because of these bad loans, the taxpayer had to bail out the banks. And so that's why it was called a bailout, and it simply meant that the taxpayer rescued the bank and paid money so that the bank didn't collapse and the bank didn't go bankrupt. But nowadays we use this phrasal verb all the time, and it could just mean to rescue somebody. Even if it's not financially, you could even use it meaning to rescue somebody if somebody helps you and gets you out of trouble. But the original meaning was financial rescue. So if your parents bail you out when you're at university, it sounds like they're sending you money to make sure that you don't end up with no money in the bank and no food on your plate. So yeah, bail someone out, rescue somebody financially. Now, if you run through something, you can run through a list of elements, you can run through a few pages in the book, and that would just mean like go through, flick through, thumb through. There are a number of words for reading something quite quickly, and it can mean that, but it can also mean something else. You can also run through your inheritance, and if you do that, you spend your inheritance very, very quickly. So you don't want to run through your money too quickly. So it can mean simply spend quickly. It doesn't have to mean look quickly, look through, go through. It can also mean spend quickly if you run through your inheritance. Or my son, very, very often he runs through his pocket money. My daughter's very careful with her money. She doesn't like spending anything. But my son tends to run through his pocket money very quickly and spend it immediately. Now, if you have a debt, you can work off that debt, meaning that you decide to pay that debt back by working. Now, a young person who's in trouble with the law, they may decide to work off their debt to society. Well, they don't decide, but the judge may decide that they should work off their debt to society, in which case they get community service, which just means that they do work in their community, in their local area, in order to compensate the local people for the crime which they committed. So work off a debt is very often used. It's when you just work in order to pay off a debt. Remember, pay off means to pay that debt back completely. Now, if you cough up, this sounds like you pay up some money, but it does sound like you are reluctant to do so. When you cough up, it's why I've written down here fork out on, because when you spend a lot of money and it's reluctantly, you fork out on something. So you might say, I had to fork out £2,000 on taxes last week. Nobody likes paying taxes, right? And you could also say I had to cough up some money for the Tax Revenue Service. In England they're called HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. They still belong to the Queen. So yeah, you need to cough up money. It means you need to pay up, but it is reluctant. It isn't something you do with pleasure. And most of the time, let's face it, we don't spend money with pleasure. But some of the time we do. And when we spend money on something which we really like, then we say we splash out on. So splash out on is very similar to fork out on, but it's not negative. Fork out on is reluctant. It's for taxes. Splash out on is lovely. It's when you splash out on a new car, or splash out on a holiday, or splash out on a computer. So it's when you spend a lot of money, but with pleasure. Okay, if you put something aside for the future, or set something aside for the future, or put something by, or set some money by, it just means you save something, usually money, but it's what it often collocates with. You put some money by for the future. So, of course, when we give children pocket money, we want them to put it aside for the future. We want them to set it by for a rainy day, or for a day when they go shopping, for toys or something like that. So all of these mean save money with the intent of using it in the future. Put something aside, set something aside, put something by, set something by. But you can even put aside some time for somebody. So it doesn't have to be money, but most of the time it collocates very well with money. However, you could put some time aside for someone later in your week, which means find some time for them on your schedule, which, you know, you may have lots of people packed in your schedule, so you might need to put some time aside for somebody. Okay, if something gobbles up your time or your money, it means it uses all of your time and your money. So you don't want, well, you might say the children are gobbling up all my spare cash, but you could also say they're gobbling up all my free time, all my spare time. Now, if something sets you back, it could mean that it holds you back, that it hinders you, and that would be a good noun to use for a hindrance, an obstacle, a setback. Yeah, the project has suffered a few setbacks, but it should finish on time. We should manage to meet the deadlines. But it has a second meaning related to money. You can say, my computer set me back 50 quid. That would be a very cheap computer, wouldn't it? But my computer set me back 1,000 quid. Whatever, but it means cost. That's all it means. It cost me 1,000 quid. It set me back 1,000 quid. I suppose the idea is that you have suffered a setback when you've spent £1,000, that you've had some kind of obstacle. I think it kind of means that. But anyway, your money is reduced when something sets you back X amount of money. It means just cost. And we use that one all the time. We really do. Okay, if you come into some money, if you come into a fortune, then you inherit a fortune. To come into some money is to inherit, and so it's not so often used. If you own two properties, you might decide to live in one and rent out the other property. So rent out, it means that you are the landlord and you take money from the tenant. You rent it out. But if you're the tenant, you just rent the property. But if you're the landlord, you let the property. It's another more formal word, but you can also say you rent it out, which is much more informal. It's a great phrasal verb to use if you're a landlord. Okay, if you square up with someone, you pay them back. It means you had a debt to them and you pay it back. You square up with them. So this morning I squared up with my brother because I owed him £15 from the poker night on Saturday. I just didn't have any spare cash at the time, and so I just squared up with him using internet banking. It's very useful and convenient. But if you square up to someone, that means you make your shoulders all square, like you're ready to punch them or attack them. So when you square up to someone, it means you prepare to fight someone. So very different meaning for square up to, and it's related to squaring up your shoulders to look big and strong, and to scare your opponent, I suppose. Now, if something cleans you out, it makes you broke. So if you go to the local casino, the casino can often clean you out just because you spend all of your money there and you're cleaned out. Now, carry forward is an accounting term, and it's when you say payment